with this gentleman here, his long black cloak. So this here is Adam Loftus. Now Adam is originally from Swineside in Yorkshire, and while he's studying, Queen Elizabeth I comes across him and takes quite a shine to Adam. She's quite a fan of his oratory style skills, and I think his handsome appearance as it was back then. So she, as a result of this, friendship, she sends him over here to Ireland. She gives him lots of great jobs. So he comes over here in 1560 as chaplain to the Lord Deputy, the Earl of Sussex, and he rises through the ranks, becoming the Anglican Archbishop of Armagh. He then trades that in for Dublin, or there. He's also the Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin City Centre. He's the Lord Justice of Ireland, Lord Chancellor of Ireland. But what he's most well remembered for is helping to set up Trinity College and becoming their first provost. So a very powerful man indeed in the 16th century in Ireland. And this painting is still on display in their exam hall to this day at Trinity College. So if you have any former Trinity students, you may be familiar with him staring down upon you as you're trying to remember your answers. So in this painting, you can also see him holding this fancy bag. So a nice, beautiful kind of tapestry bag here. And this was containing it was a fancy bag that contained the Great Seal of Ireland. So that meant that he had the power to authenticate any documents on behalf of Queen Elizabeth. So a very powerful man indeed in the 16th century Ireland. So when he moves out here, as you can imagine, he's this new wave of English coming over here to Ireland, and he's really being sent over here to help push down that new Anglican faith here in Ireland. And when he moves out here, he's very luckily given 6,000 acres of land by Queen Elizabeth. So he owns a good portion of South County Dublin. He gets lands around the country as well. But when he moves out here, he's living out in a few miles down the road in what was Castle. So a bit of it still survives today, but not much. And when he's living out here in Castle, he's regularly getting a few unwanted visits by some families living in the mountains. So he was regularly getting attacked by the O'Byrnes and the O'Tooles. So old Gaelic families that controlled a lot of the Dublin Wicklow Mountains for hundreds of years. And as you can imagine, they're trying to hold on to what's left of Gaelic Leinster, and they're not too happy about this new Englishman coming into town. So they'd come down, they'd attack his castle, take a few cows, set fire to the place, as you do. So he gets on to Queen Elizabeth, saying, myself and my family, we don't feel safe out here. So that's when she grants him permission to build Rathfarnham Castle in 1583. Now, you're probably looking at it from the outside going, it doesn't look like much, it's not that great, not that attractive. But back in the 16th century, it would have been very impressive indeed. Because this, regardless of Adam's history in connection with the castle, this building is very impressive in its own right because it's the first type of this fortified house that we see in Ireland. So Rathfarnham is the first we know of. Then there's Canturk down in Cork, Raphoe in Donegal, Portumna in Galway. They take that plan on afterwards, but this is the earliest one that we know of. So when Adam's designing the castle, he looked kind of towards Europe, Renaissance style buildings, Italian military style forts, and trying to combine the two in creating a very defensive house to live in. And this is what the castle looks like from above. Now, it is the shell of a 16th century castle. There is a few changes on the outside, however. So originally there would have been like a battlement on the rooftop. The windows would have been much smaller. The ground level would have been much lower. So it would have been a lot more imposing on the landscape. But more or less, as I said, the shell of a castle. And what's really the defensive nature of this building are these four corner towers that we see here, dotted around the castle. So these are angle bastion towers of a tres Italian design, And if we look at the walls in these towers, we can see they're not straight. So they're actually pointed, they angle out to a point. And this was used when soldiers were occupying the towers in the 16th century. So there would have been a garrison of soldiers in all of these towers guarding the castle at all times. And by having this angle in the walls, it allowed for a much more direct line of fire when they're shooting out of the castle walls with muskets. So we're long after bows and arrows now, and they're using muskets to guard the castle. So there's several gun loops in the walls, and we can still see some of them today as well. You might have seen one that we passed there, and certainly when you're walking around outside, you can still see some of the gun loops. But that's really the 16th century part of the castle. So Adam, he needed a defensive house, but he also needed a large house because himself and his wife Jane had 20 children together in the meantime. So so he needed all those jobs. So 11 of those children survived adulthood, so that was pretty good going back then. So he's got so many children, that means he has many, many descendants. So we're going to jump to the next stage of the castle's history. And we're going to jump to this gentleman here in the painting. So this here, in this painting, is Henry Loftus. And this painting, he's a great nephew of Adam's. And he inherits the castle in 1769, but he also gets a title as the Earl of Ely, so he's a newfound status in society. So he really wants to show off this new status by spending an absolute fortune in gutting his new castle and modernising it and turning it into a luxurious Georgian country house. So as this was the sticks, the middle of nowhere right up until the 60s, this was an ideal spot for him to come out here on his weekends and have, parties and balls and all that out here. So Henry would have spent most of his week, Monday to Friday, out in his townhouse in Stephen's Green, and this was just his little country escape back then. So the rooms we're going to see date to when Henry's living here at the castle. Now this painting of Henry, this family portrait, this shows us Henry and his newfound status. We can see he's an earl now, he's got the robes on him, he's there painted with his wife Frances, their two nieces, and their exotic servant, who we believe came from the Malabar coast in India, alongside two ostriches that used to reside here at the castle. So it may have been that young man's job to look after the ostriches out here at Rathfarnham. And as well, we can see that, so he's made it into the painting, really showing off. That's what Henry did best. But we can see, it's very hard now to see, but he's holding a cushion. And on that cushion is a coronet. So again, symbolising Henry's new status as the Earl. And this photocopy really does it no justice. The original painting was taken by the Swiss artist Angelika Kaufmann when she stayed out here in the late 18th century, painting Henry and his family. So she did some more work for him, and we might see that as we go around. But if you are out in the city centre and you have a few minutes to spare, it is worth going into the National Gallery to see the original of this, because this does it no justice. The real deal is about 4 metres by 4 metres. It's absolutely huge. So next time you get a chance, it's in the Ireland and Great British section, go in and have a look. So just before I move on from Henry, when Henry's out here, he's doing up the house, he employs two very famous London-based architects to help him with this transformation of Rathfarnham Castle. So when he's gutting it all, he gets in the likes of William Chambers and James Athenian Stewart to help him really turn this into a luxurious house by decking out the rooms in a neoclassical fashion. So Chambers, as you probably know, worked out in the likes of Casino at Marino, did parts of Trinity College, so he focused on Rome when he was working. But Stuart's work, he focused on ancient Greece, and we'll see that in some of the rooms as we go around. But this is the only house in the Republic of Ireland that Stuart worked on. So we'll talk more about that as we go through the rooms. But just want to just show you one photograph before we head on. So this photograph here, this shows, I suppose, the final years of the castle's history and the last kind of big players here at Rathfarnham. So this photograph, it looks like something out of Hogwarts really, doesn't it? This is from when the Jesuits are here. So the Loftuses, they're gone in the early 19th century. 2 more families move in, they leave, then they sell it on to property developers, and the Jesuits buy from them in 1913. So while the Jesuits are here, they build on these 2 wings on either side. So they built one side here as a retreat house. So the retreat house does exactly what it says in the tin. It's what they had retreats out here. So lots of young boys and girls from all around the country were sent on these retreats, very famous for them. But the likes of Irish employers back in the day, they would have sent their employees out here on retreats. So you'd have the likes of Jacob's Biscuit Factory, Guinness, Aer Lingus. They would have sent their employees out here on a Friday after work, weekend of silence, and they're back into work on the Monday morning. So tough going. But
I went on a 1-day retreat here.
did you?
Yeah.
Oh, and how was that? Was it a silent retreat?
It was grand.
Yeah,
It was
very
lovely to
good.
walk around the grounds and all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
A bit of food, which wasn't that wonderful.
I can imagine, yes. Tough living, all right.
And I did a lot of talking, which you weren't meant to do.
Oh, right, okay. Very bold. So yeah, so retreats, very popular with them. And then the other side here, this was a seminary block used for the young priests that were studying in Earlsfort Terrace, where UCD used to be. And then you'd have the main fathers themselves then in the castle. So the Jesuits, they've been here up until the 80s. So I suppose the retreats kind of died out of popularity, kind of late 70s, early 80s. And the numbers of Jesuits also kind of died off as well. So they decided to sell up, and they moved down the road to Milltown to another Jesuit house there, and then they sold the castle in 1986. And they sold the castle and 55 acres of land to property developers, and these property developers had great plans for the place. They were going to turn this castle into a hotel, bar, restaurant, as you do. So a lot of the furniture was taken out and sold off. They took out marble fireplaces, sold them off. They even took out a marble staircase at one point and sold that off. So a lot was stripped. So what you really see today is stuff that's been bought back in from the time. So great plans for this hotel, but thankfully a lot of locals in Rathfarnham came out to protest, and that's when the state stepped in, bought it over in 1987, and here we are. So a lot of work was done initially, then in 1994 was opened up to the public, really just on a summer basis, and now we're open all year round, all the time. But the work is still ongoing, and you'll see that as we go around as well. Do you have any questions? I've thrown hundreds of years out of there. No?
What happened to the 57 acres or whatever?
So that's a very good question. So the land, as you know, started with 6,000 acres. It goes down to 300 acres when Henry Loftus is here, paying off debts, gambling and all that. Then when the Jesuits are here, they have 55 acres of land. They're just using that for farming. And then that all got broken down even further. So a lot of the nearby housing estates, they were developed on. And then Rathfarnham Golf Course, which is kind of just maybe a kilometre away, they bought up majority of that land. And then outside today, we just have about 13 acres of parkland, which is owned by the council. So it really has chopped up and changed over the years. So at least we still have this anyway. But today, we only own the castle and the courtyard out the front. So that's how much the 6,000 acres has gone with all those years. Yeah, very good. So surprisingly, these plaques weren't removed. These these marble busts of famous philosophers and artists and that. We think we've got Dante, Erasmus, Cicero and Petrarch here, Michelangelo over to our right, and then a mystery man to our right here, as nobody knows, Leonardo. But yeah, we never know, could be. And then we've Lucrezia and Cleopatra down the end, so not forgetting the women. So, yeah, so that's, we think these busts were brought back from a grand tour of Europe that Henry took once he finished school. And that these are a little message in the first room that you visit in the castle of just how cultured and educated the Loftus family are. Look who you're dealing with, we're well travelled, you know, erudite, far from it.